Let us begin with the class. Today I'll be discussing about very in a crude manner the usage of AWT, not completely. See, if I start teaching the AWT part totally, it takes longer time for me to cover up everything. I'll be covering the basic steps which are needed for any of the topics that I'm going to take ahead. Okay. So accordingly, I'll be taking some examples which talk about the different components available in the AWT. Okay. Accordingly, the other things will go off. Just one minute. Okay. Let me start sharing the screen. Whether the screen is visible to you?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So let us go ahead. Here I'll be talking about two very important GUI elements in AWT, and these GUI elements remain the same in anything that you take. We have something called as components, okay, and a container. Before I proceed ahead with this, can anybody tell me whether container is bigger or component is bigger? Whether container is bigger or component is bigger. When I talk about a
Container.
container, correct. When I talk about a container and a component, container has multiple components. Am I right? Container has multiple components. So a container is a composition of multiple components. Each and every component binded with other components in a proper manner, in a layout that becomes what is called as a overall GUI. Okay. So accordingly the explanation goes. Okay. I'll not read these slides. Let me explain with this particular example that is being shown. Okay. Uh, okay, there is one small window shown over here. Okay, this talks about mentioning of components, mentioning of containers. What are these components and what are these containers looking like? Just have a look at under containers. I have written what is called as a frame, and there is something called as a panel. Okay, there is something called as a frame and there is something called as a panel. When I talk about just one minute. Okay, when I talk about any container is a placeholder which holds many components. Okay, container is one which holds many components. So such container examples are frame and panel. Okay, frame and panel. What is the meaning of a frame and a panel? When I talk about a frame, for example, in the whole of this window, if I want to make this into a frame, okay, this one more into a frame, okay, this one more into a frame. How many frames I have in total? In total, I have 3 frames. Together, I can have a panel. Together, I can have a panel. What is the meaning of this? The panel talks about panel may be horizontal panel or it may be vertical panel and it may contain multiple frames in it. I'll repeat. When I talk about a frame is a container which contains other components. I'll repeat. A frame is a container which contains other components. What about panel? Panel may be one big panel having multiple such frames. So when I put them in simpler words, there may be a panel. Panel has frames and each of the frame has components. I'll repeat. There may be a bigger panel. It may be a horizontal panel or a vertical panel. Okay. You can have a vertical panel or a horizontal panel. When I have a vertical panel or a horizontal panel, that panel may have multiple frames. Okay, and each of these frames may have multiple components. The same example has been shown. You can just see here. Both of these, the red markings, both of these are termed as panels. Over here in this example, all the panels are horizontal panels. So you can partition your whole window into multiple partitions. For partitioning, for example, you know that I call everything full window. If I take up, I call it as 100% window. You can have 33%, and the rest remaining divided like that. So such a kind of division is called equidivision. Okay, a bigger window can be divided or can be partitioned into multiple parts. For doing such things, what we use is what is called as panel. And when we have a panel, in each of the panel there is something called as a frame. Okay, what this frame contains? Frame talks about everything that is contained in that window, everything that is contained in that window or in that panel. All those components are the subparts of this frame. Okay, now have a look at this. Which are those components? The components are label, the text field, the buttons. In the example given, each of these components may make up a panel or may make up a frame as a whole. Okay, each of these components, they are the subparts of a panel or a frame. Subparts of a panel or a frame. Okay, now accordingly, which is bigger according to you? You can comment. Accordingly, which is bigger? Whether the container is bigger or a component is bigger. Container is bigger. In that, whether the panel is bigger or text field is bigger. Which is bigger? Panel is bigger, because panel is only used for partitioning the windows. And once the partitioning is done, framing is done. In that panel, you may have subdivisions. And each of the frame may have subcomponents. This is how the overall GUI is designed. Okay. Now, just 1 minute. I have to erase all these. Okay. I'll come back. Now, in this, you can just see here. Components are elementary GUI entities. For example, button, label, text field, text area. Okay, all those things are termed as components. What is a container? Containers such as frame, panel, applet window as a whole. Yesterday we had discussed about this. Are nothing but the containers which hold the components. Okay, in a specific layout. Okay. This I want to talk right now. What is this layout meaning? When I ask you this question, ask back to you this question, what is the meaning of layout? Dictionary meaning. I don't want in the technological field. Okay? I just want to ask you, what is this layout meaning? In general terms, what is this layout? Chat also. What is this layout?
Good morning, ma'am.
Yeah, good morning, Aditi. Go ahead.
Ma'am, layout is something like a framework or a template.
Correct. Can I call it as a skeleton upon which the components are
Yes.
built? Okay. So according to Aditi, layout is something which is crude. Okay. You just give a crude idea, something like flowchart, algorithm. Okay. We write flowchart or algorithm. Correct. So that kind of mentioning in what way I want to arrange my components, that is specified by a specific layout. So Java supports different kinds of layouts. The first layout that is called as flow layout. Okay, what is this? What is the meaning of this flow layout? Flow layout is follow the flow. It is first come first serve. How the components come accordingly. I'll go on placing the components. I don't bother about the look and feel of the window. Okay, what I will do? As soon as I see there is an addition, add function, you remember yesterday I had taken, okay? When I go for add function, if there is a call for add function on a component object, it will simply add, doesn't bother where it has to sit. Suppose my first component is on the leftmost topmost corner. Then beside that is exactly that amount of space is available. That space gets occupied by the next component that is coming in. Okay, so it just flows according to the input, the flow of the components happen. Then at the end, suppose the third component I am trying to add, but the third component has a larger size than what is available in the first row of the component laying out. In that case, what it does, it pushes that particular component into the next row. Okay, this kind of laying out where as and when the components come, they will start occupying the places. This kind of laying out is called as flow layout. Okay, it is called as flow layout. Then there is the second kind of layout called as the grid layout. It is talking about grid. It means there is proper partitioning of the window. Whole window getting partitioned into rows and columns. Rows and columns. Suppose grid layout demands from the user how many rows you want, how many columns you want, or you tell me what is the size, what is the height and width of each grid. If when I am calling it as a grid layout has a constructor associated with it. That constructor expects from the user what is the height and the width of each grid. Accordingly, the division of the grids happen. So it looks like a two-dimensional array. And all the components that are coming in are fitted into each of the grid. Each of the grid. How? Left to right. Left to right and top to bottom. Even in the grid layout, you can specify, I want to start from bottom to up. I want to start from right to left. Okay, you have that option in case of grid layout. How grid layout is better than flow layout? Flow layout looks clumsy because size of each component is not known. Each component that is getting inserted may take any size. May take any size. It becomes so much complicated to see the whole of the website. So flow layout is normally not so preferred. Then there is second version which is called as grid layout, which talks about proper division of the whole window into number of rows and columns. And in each of the cell, one of the components will go and sit. And it looks so neatly arranged. All the components look so neatly arranged. And that is how grid layout looks like. It very simple, in very simple terminology, I can call it as a two-dimensional array. Okay, there is something called as, third one called as the border layout. BORDER. When I talk about bordering, what does this border layout mean? When I talk about border, okay, can anybody guess what it may be? What it may be? Can anybody guess? Yes, guys, can anybody guess? Anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
Border layout can be said like just like in this figure which is shown here, the structure like it is showing the border means the structure how there.
No, whatever the dotted lines are being shown, no, the dotted lines are nothing but just the panels. Okay, for the simplicity it is shown. Actually, it won't look like that in the window. The dotted lines are shown just to showcase that this is how you can have the division of the window done. Okay, so we are nearer, Ankit. Okay, anyway, let me explain. You have the whole window, okay, something like this. In the whole window, I think you people are disturbing me like anything because many people are getting inside. Let me unlock the meeting. Okay. Yeah. Now, you just can see, guys, please pay attention. You have a window available like this. Okay. In this window, how many directions you have? Normally, when I take up a two-dimensional array, when I take up a window like this, it is a 2D window, not a 3D window. How many directions I have? Don't tell me X and Y. Directions I have in 4 directions: north, south, west, east. Okay, north, south, west, east, or news, I tell. Okay, when I take up a window, my window getting divided like this: northern side, southern side, eastern side, western side, and the remaining part called as the center. Okay, you can place the components in this manner. You can place the components in this manner. For example, what you can do? You can create a panel 1, and give the direction as north. Create one more panel and give the direction as south. Create a panel and give the direction as west. Create a panel and give the direction as east. And create one more panel, give the direction as center. You have 5 directions: north, south, east, west, and center. Okay, now according to these 5 panels, in each of the panel, go on placing the components in the flow order. That is flow layout. So you can have a combination of layouts. What you can do for the whole window, let me decide it is a border layout, and in each of the panels that I have decided, in each of the panel, the components will go and sit in each of the panel in the flow layout manner. Or in each of the panel, the components will go and sit in the grid layout panel. For example, if I take the north panel, okay, I have created a north panel. In that north panel, now what I will do? In this panel, let me imply grid layout, that how this panel will look like. It divides the whole panel into number of rows and columns, and each of the component that is coming in is fitted into that panel, into that particular cell. So you can have mix up of layouts. You can create a grid layout. Inside that, ask for the flow layout. And you can create a border layout and ask to encounter in each of the partition a flow layout or a grid layout. The combination of layouts can be formed. This is the beauty of containers. A container can be either a flow layout or a grid layout or a border layout or a combination of any of these layouts. I hope this is clear for you. Guys, I hope this is clear for you. Please let me know.
It's clear.
It's clear. It's clear. Okay, the same kind of layouts are also visible in JavaFX. Okay. Now, whether you are thorough with what is a component, what is a container. Container is always a bigger one. Component is a smaller version. Smaller thing, smallest part of the window is called as a component. Okay. And such components in each of the container can be arranged in any of the layouts. What are the layouts? Different layouts. The different layouts available are either the flow layout, follow the flow. As and when I get a component, I just go on putting from left to right. I don't bother about its size. Okay, that is called as a flow layout. Or I can have something called as grid layout, which talks about number of rows and columns, and accordingly the window getting divided, or accordingly the container getting divided, and in accordance to that, the components that come in that are placed. This whole thing, laying out, component, container, all these are talking about arrangement of components, how my front end should look like. Okay, all these are coming in to you with a ready-made code, correct? Joomla you have used WordPress, all those things would have already implemented these things by default. That's why you have not programmed them. Okay, but if you start understanding the internal intent of each of them, then you will understand that there are these layouts available. Okay, let me continue with this. Now, along with these layouts, there is something called as controls. Okay, there is something called as controls. So you just imagine like this: there is a window created, and the whole of the window. Imagine this, there is a, let me clear the screen first. Okay, let me clear the screen and let me restart. Now, imagine there is a window, there is a window. Now this window got created and I have applied a flow layout or border layout or grid layout, whatever it is. Okay. Now what has happened? I have placed the components like this. This part of my window must have advertisements. Must have advertisements. This part of the window is divided like this. Okay, it is divided like this. It means what? Out of the whole window got divided into two frames. Okay, and each in the second frame there is a division by 2 again. 50% given to sub panel 1, 50% given to another panel. You can divide like this. This part always must have the advertisement. So you call that functionality over here. Okay, set the target as this panel ID. Then you have 50% divided in the second panel or the second frame. Then top of this frame, the first part of the frame that is divided, over here, I want my login page. I want my login page. Obviously, you would have written a program for login creation. That login page source, you can just invite here. So this is only look and feel. All the background things you have to do programmatically. Okay. Now this part must have weather report. Call a function for that. Okay. This is how the GUI is helping to place properly to the components. Look here. The login page has multiple subcomponents. Okay. Even this weather report has multiple subcomponents. Even this advertisement may have multiple subcomponents. On top, you may have Google advertisement. Secondly, you may have Yahoo advertisement. You may have Vodafone advertisement. All those advertisements, they are nothing but subcomponents of the whole panel. And even the login page may have many subcomponents. This is how the layout looks like. For this reason, the layout is used. Then, there is something called as control. What is this control talking about? You have placed all your components on the window in the way you want. But have you given the action for the components? That action giving is called as control. Okay. You have different action frameworks available. Okay. And we call them as listeners. We call them as listeners. Listener. Okay. We call them as listeners. What these listeners are about? We call them as listeners because on doing something it has to listen to it, accordingly it has to act. On doing something it has to do. Okay? Because it has to listen carefully what is happening. Then it has to react. That's why they are called as listeners. One such controlling thing available is listener. And these listeners are divided into, guys, I have not written them on any of these PPTs. Okay, I'm talking. These listeners can be any of the things like on press of the key. On press of the key, it has to do something. So I call it as keyboard listener, or I call it as key listener. When I press on the mouse button, the mouse button pressed, it has to listen to it. That is called as mouse listener. Okay, there is something called as button. On click of the button, something has to happen. This is called as button listener. Okay, can I have a button listener separately? Can I have a label listener separately? Can I have a hyperlink listener separately? I cannot have. All of them put together, we call something as action listeners. By clicking on any of the components, it has to perform some action. That's why I call it as action listener. Okay, so there are different listeners available. I call them as mouse listeners. I call them as key listeners. I call them as action listeners. Action listeners will come into picture when I have on clicking or on moving my cursor on any of the components. It will trigger what is called as action listener. Okay, any doubt up to this point? Any doubt up to this point? Please let me know. Any doubt?
No,
No, no doubts? Can I proceed ahead? Now, upon all these, there is a bump. Okay, there is a bump of all. Who is that? That window. If window is not there, do you have any flow layout? Do you have any grid layout? Do you have any panel? Do you have any kind of frame? Do you have any kind of components? No. Nothing exists if window is not there. Okay, nothing exists if window is not there. That's why I have a special listener called as window listener. What is this doing? What is that window listener doing? Have you seen whenever you open a window, there are three options on the right top corner. Minimize, maximize, close. Do they exist like that only? When I click on that underscore, it minimizes. When I click on that bigger square listed there, over here you can see this is minimized, this is maximized, this is closed. Do they exist like that only? They should have a functionality associated. This is called as window closing. This is called as window minimizing. This is called as window maximizing. All these are associated with functions and they listen to only one listener, which is called as window listener. Window listener has function overriding for window closing. I'll be showing that in my next class. Okay, how to write that window listener. I'll be showing that too. Okay, now similarly, I have window minimizing, I have window maximizing. All of them are available as part of what is called as window listener. So how many listeners I have? I talk about key listener, I talk about mouse listener, I talk about window listener. Or I talk about what is called as action listener. Action listener is for all the components. Key listener is for the keyboard. Mouse listener is for the mouse that is associated. Window listener is for the window into which the whole of the GUI is created. Action listener, action is for each of the component that is available in the whole of the window. Are you all okay with it?
yes, ma'am.
I think I've been shouting like anything for this. Okay, let me just go to the next slide. Okay, this I have written already the courtesy from where I have taken this. Okay, this talks about the hierarchy of the classes or the interfaces that are available. Okay, who is the main person? Container. Inside that container, I can have either a panel or a window. This window is different from the window that I am talking. Please listen. This window is different. Window listener is different from this window. Okay. I'm so sorry. The window that I was speaking about, that is different from this window. Okay. A container may contain window listener objects. Okay. That is what is this window. You can have a dialog box created. On click of a button, there is a pop-up window. That is what is this window talking about. Okay. On click of a button, it just pops up and tells you cannot log in with this. Password and username are not matching. Okay. Something like that. That pop-up window is this, not the bigger window. Please don't get confused. Then there is something called as scroll pane. What is scroll pane about? When I talk about scroll pane, I can have a vertical or a horizontal scroll. The scroll pane is just to allow laying of the components in such a manner that if the components are so many that they are not fitted in the single window size, then what you can do is you can just activate the scroll pane, make this object of scroll pane active. It means what? From left to right, you can just go on laying the components like anything until the dead end. You can just go on putting the elements, components like anything. There is no hard and fast rule that as soon as the window size ends, you just have to stop laying the components. So whenever there is a more amount of components to be placed in the window, single window, you just have to activate this scroll pane. Okay, scroll pane can be vertical or horizontal. Scroll bars you have seen top to bottom and left to right or right to left. That is available in scroll pane. Now, this panel is addressed by what is called as applet. I have talked about before many a times. AWT is totally based on applet. That's why it has few drawbacks. And these windows can again have frame or a dialog box. What is this frame talking about? Smaller part. For example, in the whole window, I have asked from the user uh, form available here. Over here, what I have entered, enter the value of n, and I have given a text box. Okay, and I have given a submit button here. On clicking this submit button, I want the result. Suppose I have given the value as 5. On pressing the submit button, it should call a function called fact function, somewhere available. Okay, it calculates that factorial, and I want it to be printed over here. Say factorial of 4 is 24. Where it is getting printed? In the window. Okay, in the window. But in the window where? A separate frame. That's why frame comes under window. Okay, such kind of GUIs are made available using all these different classes or interfaces that are available. Okay, so all these are available as part of container class. I hope this is clear for you. I hope this is clear. Yes, thank you for your comments. Okay, now anything that you want to discuss over here? Otherwise, I'll show this program. Okay, this I will take up in the next class because I'm talking about window listener. Okay, I'll talk about that in the next class. Today, I'll take the simple example and just stop. Okay, what is that I want to do? I want to perform this thing. Create a window, okay, which has a label counter and has a text field which go on counting, incrementing the counter on hit of this count button. As soon as I hit on the count button, there has to be increment in the current value and it should print me in the same text field the next incremented value. It is incrementing counter. You can just see here there was 80, but now here there is 110. Guys, you have to excuse me for this because I have taken these snaps from somewhere. Okay. The reason for that, I don't have any laptop to show you all these programs. Otherwise, I would have typed it in front of you and shown it to you. I have done it separately and taken the snapshot of it and put as the PPT. Please excuse me, pardon me for another 2 days. Once I get back my laptop, I'll show you all the programs. Okay. Now this is what I want to do. I'll just go back. Okay, let us begin. I had used this AWT yesterday also. Okay, now what I will do, I will use java.awt.start and dot event I have taken that is because I want to add the action listener. What is that action listener? Because on click of the button something has to happen. That is called as action listener. For that reason this event is taken. Any clicking on any of the component is called as, is termed as event. Okay, and any event is associated with one or the other listeners. Okay, we will go back to that later. Now, next thing what I will do is, I will take a label count, EF count, what is this? An object of label, an object of text field, an object of button. What we had done previously, just go back here, there is an object button 1 created of button class. Okay. Instead of doing it together, what I have done in this example is, I have taken the declaration separately and usage separately. That's it. No change at all. What I have done, I have created an object. Have I instantiated that? Not. Okay. What is this? Label count. This is the name. Text field, TF count. Button, PTN count. Then I have taken a counter variable which will increment automatically on click of the button. Then inside this constructor is for putting all the things together or instantiating. Now, before I start, what I have done, I have set the layout as flow layout. What is the meaning of flow layout? Go on putting from left to right. Don't bother. As soon as you encounter the end of the window size, you have to stop and go to the next column. Sorry, next row. Until the end of the window, you have to continue this. Okay, left to right, top to bottom. Then label count. Even if you don't set the layout, by default the flow layout is the default layout. Okay. Then I have taken label count. Look here, label count is what? Object of label class. Okay. Equal to new label of counter. Just I will go further. What is this counter? It is the label. Okay, heading that is being initialized in the constructor, parameterized constructor. Then I will take the second object. What is that? Second object is the text field object, and I have specified the size. Okay, I have specified the size. What is that size? 10. It can accommodate at max 10 number of characters. Okay, 10 number of characters. Then using this object, I have made it editable. Why I have to make it editable? I have to make it editable equal to false. I have to make it non-editable text field. What is the meaning of non-editable text field? If I try to enter anything over here, it should not allow me. It means it will be what I call, you cannot even press the cursor inside this. It is non-editable. Okay, so you cannot edit. How you can make it? Using that object, call the set editable option or function and pass the boolean value false. What this does, that text field, whatever content is available, that becomes non-editable. You cannot type from the keyboard. You can stop from typing from the keyboard. Why you have to stop? Because the initial value is supplied already. Where it is supplied, it has not been supplied yet. Okay. Now, add a TF count, add a label count. You have added the label, you have added the text field. How they are laid out? They are laid out side by side because it is flow layout, left to right. Okay. Now, next I want to do button. So I have created the button and labeled it as count. Just have a look at it. Labeled it as count. Since it is a flow layout, side by side they are being placed. Add that button. Okay. Now, where I have to add the action listener? I have to add the action listener with reference to the button object, not with reference to the label, not with reference to the text field. If I add the action listener with reference to the object of the text field, then on click of the text field, it will perform something. Okay, so action listener with what object you are calling, with that particular component, that action listener is attached. This is how the action listener usage is, and I have called on this, it means on the current object. Now, set title. This is for, these are all optional, these are not so mandatory. And set the size of the window. The applet window has to be of 250 by 100 pixel. Set visible to. The set visible to has to be always there. This is mandatory. If you don't make it set visible, that particular window will not be available for you. So this is mandatory. Set visible of 2. Okay. Then I have started the main method. Okay. Inside this main method, what I have done, I have simply created an object of that constructor. Okay. And then I have written the matching action performed for this action listener. Action listener whenever I call, add action listener whenever I call, it will search for its matching action performed. And this action performed takes in an event called as action event. Guys, please pardon me. I cannot explain beyond this because events, if I start taking, it will take 1 week time for me. Please, one request from my side, all of you go through Java events before my next class. Okay? It's a request from my side. I cannot cover all those things because Java effects related events I will be covering in my class. Okay? Action performed always accepts an object of action event. This action event talks about what is that event you want to go for. Okay. Now, plus count I have done. That count where I have to write in the text field. I have to update in the text field. So I will take that object. Okay. Dot set text. I have something called as get text. I have something called as set text. Get text is for getting what is available in that component. Okay. Set text is to set that particular text visible at that moment. And set text of what? Count. So every time the counter is hit, that this button is hit, every time the counter getting incremented. Okay. This is an example where I have shown how to have flow layout, how do we have label created, how do we have text field created, how do we have a button created. In the first example I had shown you the button creation. Okay. Now how do I add action to this button? Similarly, you can add the action listener, add action listener. If you have not created the button, suppose imagine you have not created the button, what you can do? You can use the text field object, that is AOOP-AWT dot add action listener of this, and action perform must do this. What is this? Over here again you have to write TF count, okay, TF count dot set text of count. It means what? Whenever I move my cursor on the text field and hit on the text field, go on hitting on the text field, it has to increment the counter. So whichever component you want to write the action listener, you can write. You can write. Any doubt in this? Any doubt in this? Guys, please comment.
Doubts, ma'am.
It's clear.
Ma'am, you have extended the frame class, no, ma'am?
I'll just go back by one slide, just 1 minute. Yeah, extended the frame and implements action listener.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
I'm so sorry, I have not explained this line. Thank you, Irana, for reminding me. Okay. Any of the class that you are creating, AWT counter over here, example you have taken, any of the AWT class that you are creating, you have to extend the frame if you have planning of having some layout. Otherwise, you can very well go ahead. As compared to this previous example, if you see, I had written for extend applet. Correct? Extend applet. Extend applet, if you do, all these action listener and all are not there in applet, are not there in the applet. Frame is an extended version of that applet class. Okay, what frame contains? Frame contains, along with all those things that were there in the applet, along with that, it has an added advantage of using the functions like add action listener, add action event, okay, then set visible, set layout, set text, all these are available as part of frame. Okay, and action listener talks about all the events. It talks about action events. Please go through the events, all of you. Okay. Very good question, Irana. I had forgotten that. In the previous example, I had written extends applet. Here I have written extends frame. There is a reason for that. When I want to use action listener, I have to extend frame because action listener is unavailable in applets. Yes, any other doubts? No other doubts? If so, I have to end the meeting for today. Okay. Because